Throughout this course of the first half of the season, one thing that I've been stressing towards the altitude teams is that if you want respect, you earn your respect on the road. You don't earn your respect by having a great home record. Because you are playing in altitude, because you're used to breathing the thin level of air, because you're used to dealing with that kind of climate, technically you're supposed to win every home game because you have had more than enough time than the visiting team to adapt to that type of oxygen, to adapt to that type of climate. That's why throughout this first half of the season, I said Rocky Mountain teams, altitude teams, if you want to get the kind of respect that you believe you deserve, you earn it by wins on the road. It doesn't matter who you play on the road. You have to win those games, and ties are unacceptable. Because the reason why ties are unacceptable for you is because ties on the road now. Ties at home, that's fine, but ties on the road is unacceptable. The reason why ties on the road is unacceptable for the altitude teams is because you have to, if you view yourself as a true contender, if you view yourself as a true competitor, you have to show it on the road. And the only way you show it is by wins. That shows that you are a true contender. And this past weekend, the altitude teams did a terrible job. The altitude teams reminded us that they're not a true contender by how they've been performing on the road, not only this past weekend, but largely throughout the whole season. Let's start with the Colorado Rapids. The Colorado Rapids was the top seed in the Western Conference playoffs last year. They had a thrilling 5-2 win against LAFC on decision day of last year. And, you know, I was thinking that I thought that same momentum was going to carry over into the playoffs. But then when the playoffs came, they were one and done. One and done on Thanksgiving Day, losing to Portland, which has been historically the better team and proved again at that time that they were the better team. Then come this season, the Rapids, they started the season on the road. They lost to LAFC, and they weren't even competitive in that game. They lost by 3 goals, 3-0. They didn't even score. They were shut out in that game. Then coming off to this past weekend. So this past weekend, I wasn't really watching the Colorado-Minnesota game to begin with. I was mainly paying attention to the Chicago-LA Galaxy game. But then once I realized that game was going to end in a scoreless draw, that's when I started looking at my ESPN app, and I was like looking to see what other games are on. Now I saw that the Colorado-Minnesota game, it was tied at 1, and it was like less than 15 minutes to go in regulation. So I was thinking, maybe this game will end in a tie, but I'm going to see if Colorado can pull off this victory, because they need this win more than Minnesota, because they need to prove to the Western Conference and the nation as a whole that they are a true contender, that they are a legitimate contender. So I turned it to the game, and with less than 13 minutes to go in the game, like Minnesota scored in the 77th minute, and then I think they scored again in the 79th minute. And Minnesota ended up winning the game 3-1. Like, Colorado allowed 2 goals in less than 13 minutes to go in that game. So that brought Colorado's total road record so far to 0-3-1. They have 3 losses and 1 tie. They are winless on the road. All of their losses on the road have been blowout losses. Besides that 3-0 loss to LAFC, the 3-1 loss this past weekend to Minnesota, and then the 3-1 loss to Dallas. Now, let me tell you something. For those who are just now getting into soccer, you're still learning about the game. Losing a game by more than 2 goals, by 2 or more goals, that's considered a blowout loss. Because scoring is not too frequent in the game because of the difficulty for teams to score and the fact or the possibility that teams don't really score that much often, if your team loses by 2 or more goals, that is a blowout loss in soccer. So you may be seeing 3-1 thinking, oh, they only lost by 2 points. Oh no, it's way more than 2 points that they lost by. You got to look deeper besides those 2 points. Minnesota, I don't know what they turned on in those last 15 minutes of the game, but those last 15 minutes of the game, Minnesota dominated that game, and they didn't want to leave that game with a tie. And to me, it looked like Colorado was playing to tie the game instead of playing to win the game. And because you were playing to tie the game, Colorado, is the reason why you lost the game. But now that was on Saturday. And then Salt Lake, come Sunday was Salt Lake. And I believe Salt Lake saw Colorado. They're like, well, you only allowed 3 points? Hold my beer. I can do better than that. Then they come up on Sunday and allow 6 goals to an NYCFC team that had a short week. NYCFC, they played against Seattle in the CONCACAF Champions League. They were eliminated by Seattle on a Wednesday. And then they had to turn around in a short week and prepare for an MLS matchup against Salt Lake. The score of this game should have been the other way around. Salt Lake should have been the team to win 6-0. Salt Lake should have been the more energetic team. Salt Lake should have been the more aggressive team, but that wasn't the case. So it seems like Colorado and Salt Lake, they're on a collision course to see who can have the worst road record in the Western Conference. Salt Lake's basically told Colorado, anything you can do on the road, I can do worse. However, for this season so far, Salt Lake is performing better than Colorado on the road. They are 2-3-1. They have 8 points on the road. Colorado only has 1 point on the road. And that win against New England earlier this season, that was a good one. That was epic. That Salt Lake come from behind victory in the snow against New England. That was a classic game. I like that one. But listen, I understand that you're not Salt Lake and Colorado. I understand that you're not going to win every single game on the road. But when you perform on the road, your performance away from the altitude has to be better than your performance in altitude. The reason for this is the perception is that you're only good at home because you have the home field advantage with the altitude. So teams throughout the league, they only take you serious when they're playing in your home stadium. They only view you as a true competitive team when they're playing at your home stadium. When you leave your home stadium, you're not looked upon as a worthy opponent to take serious because of the home field advantage you have with the altitude. So that's why when you travel on the road, your performance on the road has to be 10 times better than your performance at home. That's why I put emphasis on winning on the road rather than tying on the road, because when you win on the road, you will show teams that you are serious, that you're just not a team that plays well in altitude, but you can play well in or out of altitude. That's what you got to prove to the rest of the MLS. You have to be able to prove that you can play good in or out of the altitude, that no matter where you play, you will be competitive. And so far, you have not shown that. Now, do you understand what I'm saying, Colorado and Salt Lake fans? Let me explain something to you, Colorado and Salt Lake fans. If you want respect from the rest of the MLS, Your team has to win on the road. Colorado, no more blowout losses on the road. Salt Lake, you haven't been as bad as Colorado on the road, but this past weekend against NYCFC, let's make sure that doesn't happen again. Because if it happens again, you will not get the respect that you desire. So if you're a Salt Lake and a Colorado fan, you need to be more excited when you need to be more interested in your team when they play on the road, because that's when you'll see if they're really good or not. Because whenever they play at home, they have that home field advantage. They're used to breathing in that altitude. They're used to living in that type of climate, while the visiting team only have like a few hours or less than a day to get adjusted to it. And the same goes for the USL teams that play in the altitude. El Paso, you're 0-4 on the road this season, including a U.S. Open Cup loss to Central Valley Fuego. And that San Antonio game you played this past weekend, even though the final score was 1-0, that game wasn't as close as the score suggested. San Antonio should have scored way more points than just one goal. You being 0-4 in the season does not help your cause. You being 0-4 in the season does not help you to gain the respect that you desire in the USL. Now, New Mexico and Colorado Springs, they're not as bad as El Paso, but still, the same goes for y'all. Now, Colorado Springs is doing really good, but this for all the teams, the MLS and USL teams that play in altitude. You want your respect, you gain your respect by winning on the road. So far, Colorado Springs is the best professional soccer road team this season. When it comes to the MLS and the USL teams when it comes to MLS and USL altitude teams, Colorado Springs Switchbacks is the best road team this season so far. They have already won multiple games. Like there's a point this season where they're traveling back-to-back weeks to the East Coast. 1 week, they went to Birmingham. They won against Birmingham. And then the following week, the exact following week, they traveled to Miami and they beat Miami. The Switchbacks so far are 3-0 on the season. 9 points. 9 points on the road this season. Colorado Springs is not only like one of the best teams, the best USL teams in the Western Conference. They're probably the best team in the entire USL right now, probably. And this altitude thing, this doesn't only go for soccer teams. Russell Wilson, you're getting ready to. You're now the quarterback for the Broncos, the Denver Broncos of the NFL. Russell Wilson, take notes. Pay attention to these MLS and USL teams playing at altitude. Russell Wilson, if you want to gain your respect as a true, legitimate franchise quarterback for the Denver Broncos, you earn your respect by winning games on the road. That means winning at Kansas City, winning at Las Vegas, winning at Los Angeles twice. I believe the Broncos played the Chargers and the Rams this year. So you're probably going to travel there twice. You beat them twice. That means winning at Baltimore, winning at Tennessee, winning at New York. That's how you're going to gain your respect, Russell Wilson, as a quarterback for the Denver Broncos. Winning on the road. Even in the NBA. Nikola Jokic, Donovan Mitchell. You want your respect in the NBA? You dominate on the road. You beat teams on the road, because NBA got it tougher because the way the NBA travels season is like players don't have enough time to get used to altitude at all. They have a small amount of time. Like they start off, let's say an Eastern Conference team like Brooklyn. They'll have to travel to San Antonio. They play in San Antonio one night. Then they got to go to, then 2 nights later, they have to go travel to OKC. They play OKC one night. And then the next night, they'll have to travel to Denver and Salt Lake for back-to-back nights. Players don't have enough time to deal with that kind of altitude in a short amount of time. So that's why the Denver Nuggets and the Utah Jazz are always top 5 seeds in the Western Conference. They got the home field advantage better than any other professional sport. But those two teams are usually exposed in the playoffs. Colorado Rapids, Real Salt Lake. Your margin for error in the MLS Western Conference this year is real thin. You had some luck on your side. Both of y'all had some luck on your side last year. Salt Lake, remember that decision day game? The referee didn't call the handball. That was a handball against Sporting KC. You got away with that one. Colorado, I don't know what happened to Kansas City and Seattle. I guess the number 1 seed wasn't a big deal for them. It didn't really matter for them. And that's probably why you got it last year. But look at this other element. Last year, the state of Texas was trash in the MLS last year. No MLS team in the state of Texas made it to the playoffs. All of the Texas teams were at the bottom of the Western Conference. Also, the state of California was pretty mediocre. San Jose, they started the season off pretty good last year, but then they died off. And LAFC and LA Galaxy, they were just mediocre. They were inconsistent. Sometimes they were good and sometimes they were bad. Such is not the case this year. Austin, Dallas, and Houston look competitive, and they look better than you, Colorado. I want to say Salt Lake. Salt Lake is pretty decent, but they're just looking better. Austin, Dallas, and Houston are looking good this year. They're looking like playoff contenders this year. And also the California teams, LA Galaxy, LAFC, they're definitely a lock for the playoffs. San Jose, I'm not too sure about San Jose. San Jose, they still look pretty, I don't know yet. I don't know about San Jose. And then the Seattle and Portland, the Northwest teams, they're gonna be top 5 seed regardless of how y'all other teams play. Portland and Seattle are gonna be top 5, top 7 seeds regardless. So that's why I say altitude teams, the Rocky Mountain teams, Colorado and Salt Lake, your margin for error is thin. You had some luck on your side last year. You're not gonna have that same kind of luck this year. If you want your respect, and if you don't want to miss the playoffs, you must win games on the road. You can't play for ties on the road. You play to win the game on the road. You want to get your ties, you can do that at home when you're playing at altitude. A lot of teams would rather you play for the tie while you're at home. Colorado and Salt Lake. A lot of teams would rather you try to play for the tie because of the altitude. But when you go on the road, you play to win the game if you want to get the respect that you believe you deserve.